Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm greeting all of you. You seem not to be in a good mood. You don't seem to be in a good mood. What we wanted to do is quickly tell you about, in a paragraph or two, about the outcome of the G20 discussion and allow you to ask whatever questions you want to about the G20, not about anything else. Kopano, I'm in a closed period. So, okay. During the last 4 days, the deputies, finance ministers, and central bank governors held very constructive discussions. We considered and discussed the work program of the finance track working groups, the financial sector issues, the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, international taxation, and the Joint Finance and Health Task Force. Most members endorsed the work of the program, which provides the basis for the presidency to work with co-chairs in partnership with international organizations to implement the work program for the year. The deputies had a very robust discussion on various components of what is called the chair's summary. The South African president has been keen to use every opportunity to forge consensus as far as possible, though it also respects and acknowledges that differences remain. Consequently, we will issue a chair's summary based very much on the version we have discussed extensively and refined in the past few days. That's the key thing we will be issuing, that chair's summary, which summarizes some of those issues. If you don't have it by now, we have issued the chair's summary. Governor, you want to add?
No, except just to say that the chair's summary covers all the topics that we discussed over the past 2 days. So we can take questions, and you just raise your hand, identify yourself, and say the media house that you are affiliated with, and we would take your questions. Right here in front. The microphones, move.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. It's Vitaly Mark from Tels News Agency. The question for the minister, what was the issue that you are more satisfied that it was breakthrough? And opposite, what is the issue that you think is lack of the progress? Thank you.
Colleagues, can I just ask if you've got a question, you can come to the side of the podium so that we...
In the meantime, Matlasa, let me answer this one. I'm most satisfied with the fact that the work program has been agreed and adopted. You must understand how the G20 works. This is an initial first meeting of the ministers of and finance ministers and central bankers. And for that reason, we have been working hard on getting a work program which will form the basis of the discussions of the future meetings. To that extent, I'm happy with progress. I'm not happy with the fact that we couldn't achieve a consensus and issue a communique. So I think I've answered both your questions in that respect.
Hello, this is Lamise Umerji from News 24. I would like to find out if you can share more on what the process has been like without top officials from the US, Brazil, China, India, and Japan. Do you think this has played a role in affecting the outcomes?
It has not played a role initially. I don't know when you say top officials from these countries. Let me just give an indication. I mean, from the USA, Scott Bissett, the Secretary Treasurer, sent a note verbal that he is coming. All of a sudden, the President of the United States called his first budget meeting, his first cabinet meeting yesterday. And therefore, Scott had, as a result, to attend the first meeting. The Brazilian, the top officials, the international deputy minister, which normally attends most of this meeting, was here. Similar process with the Chinese international minister, the vice minister who normally attends, they were here. So there were top officials from those two countries.
Shall we say that almost all of the governors were there? All central banks were represented. To the extent that there wasn't a governor, there would have been a deputy governor with full delegated authority. There was no flag that was empty. Every country was represented.
Hilary goes to the man.
Hilary Jaffe from Business Day. In the communique, right at the end of the Brazilian presidency, the Fina track talked about good prospects of a soft landing of the global economy. So that was in October. In your communique now, you're not talking about any soft landing. You are talking about subdued growth, but economies are resilient. So how concerned are you about how sort of rapidly, in a sense, the outlook seems to have changed between October and now, and what has changed that outlook?
We do not have a communique. We have got a chair statement at the moment. So just so that it becomes clear. There are lots of things that has changed. You would have seen that both the IMF, the World Bank, and even the OECD revised their growth forecasts. In our case in South Africa, we also did revise our growth forecasts since then. Lots of things have changed. There is heightened uncertainty in the global economy, and you would have realized that in many instances, central banks present a baseline forecast and also present scenarios. A presentation of the alternative scenarios is taking account of the fact that there is so much uncertainty. And here at home, it has been a tradition for our Treasury to also release a risk statement as part of the budget, and that's how you manage the uncertainty.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kosuke Moriaki from Kyodo News, Japan, and I have two questions for Minister. First one, sorry, I assume that there is no joint communique or joint statement to be issued. And how do you see the background or the reason of why the G20 countries cannot reach for the agreement to issue that kind of a joint statement? And Other question is that the president emphasized a lot about the African voices has to be heard. And after 4 days of meeting, do you think that the African voices are heard enough, or it still needs to be heard more, or the hearing should be improved? Thank you.
The issue of the communique and the absence thereof is not something new. To my knowledge, I mean, since the Russia-Ukraine war, it has been difficult to find a joint communique. We've always relied, since Indonesia in 2022, on what is called a chair's statement. Same in India. Brazil, they managed to do it something differently. But the matters that gave occasion to that are slightly different now. Now that new differences have emerged on a number of other topics, which make it difficult to have what is called a joint communique. And we have reverted back to what we did in Indonesia and India, to a chair's summary. What was the second question?
Our second question is about do you think that the African voices are heard enough, or yeah?
The matter of the African voice in the G20 is an ongoing challenge. That's why, for instance, we have found the African Union being accepted as a full member, is to give additional voice to South Africa. In addition to that, Nigeria and Egypt have been accepted now as permanent invitees. It's a process of giving that. With the South African presidents, we have invited all the 5 regional economic communities to participate. SADC was represented, was still trying to talk to the East Africa, COMESA, and ECOWAS as well to be part of this.
All right, greetings, Governor and Minister over here. My name is Innocent from SABC Channel Africa. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is around global versus local challenges. And given the diverse economic landscape across the G20 nations, how is the G20 going to ensure that the global sustainable architecture that is spoken about is able to suit and adapt to the needs of emerging markets in Africa? And I'm asking this, Governor, because access to affordable funding remains an issue. Thank you.
I'm not sure, you say sustainable architecture, but let me see if I understood you. There are 2 things. You can give away the mic, I will answer both questions anyway. There is the issue of the international financial architecture, and there is the issue of sustainable finance. Let's start with the international financial architecture. The central to the international financial architecture had been the creation of a global financial safety net. That global financial safety net has got at its center the International Monetary Fund. The second layer of that global financial safety net is the regional financing arrangements like Shanghai and the BRICS contingency reserve arrangements. The third layer is the bilateral arrangements between countries like South Africa has got a swap line with the People's Bank of China. We've got and a number of countries also have that. That completes the global financial safety net. And right at the bottom is what the countries themselves provide as a safety. Countries holding on to foreign exchange reserves. That's the net. And in the conversations about this international financial architecture for a long time, and which links back to the question that was raised about African voices, had been the issue of the voice and representation of African countries in that international financial architecture. The conversations started under the Australian presidency of the G20 in 2006, and it took a number of years until 2009, where a third chair was created for sub-Saharan Africa in the World Bank. Last year, finally, a third chair for sub-Saharan Africa had been created in the International Monetary Fund, thus making the board of the two Bretton Woods institutions to be made up of 25 members. These things that have to be negotiated globally take time, and I can understand sometimes people say, tell us what you achieved in this meeting. Think of that configuration. Decision process started in 2006, and the IMF had only eventually finalized the issue of voice of the African countries in 2024. That is the international financial architecture. There is the issue of the sustainable finance, which is on the agenda of the G20 and has been part of our presidency's work. That work is covered by the Sustainable Finance Working Group within the G20. And it looks at the issues of adaptation financing, mitigation financing, transition financing in terms of the climate change, and thus the contribution to sustainable development. That work takes place alongside the work of the Framework Working Group of the G20, and the Framework Working Group is responsible for driving the agenda for a strong, inclusive, and sustainable growth. And the three pillars of that work of the Framework Working Group is made of three components. One is the issue of macroeconomic stability, which is fiscal and monetary. Those are the two components. And the third had been positive structural reform programs which are driven domestically. And so all of those, you cannot take a global position and say there is now global financial stability or global price stability. You take each other, you hold each other to account, because every country would then state what is it that they are doing in each one of those. And those are the conversations that had also been taking place over the past 4 days.
Oh, there's another. Oh, okay. You go. I go? Okay. Well, thanks so much, Governor and Minister, for your time. My name is Lucia. I work for Spain's International News
You're
Agency.
speaking very soft. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see now. Thanks so much for your time, Minister and Governor. My name is Lucia. I work for Spain's International News Agency, and I have two questions. Could you comment on what are the main issues of contention? What have been the main topics that have prevented you from issuing a joint communique? And then another question is, are you worried that this lack of agreement, this tension that we're seeing globally really kind of like stains the whole year, all the meetings that are coming up until the heads of states meeting in November, if I'm not wrong? Thank you.
I don't know whether you have had access to the chair's statement. The chair's statement would illustrate where there may be some areas of disagreement, areas of agreement. Between the different parties. For instance, I may say there may be a company which has, a country which has got a different view on how we manage climate finance. Another country may have a different view on a specific topic. We kind of, under each of those headings, highlight those areas of differences.
So, good afternoon, sir. Thank you. My question for Excellence Minister. I'm Isaac Lorenzo from Angola newspaper. So, I have two questions. The first is, we know that the South Africa G20 presidents is a moment historic for SADC area. The question is, how can the G20 help with more financing for SADC, and which sector are priority?
What do you mean financing for SAC? What is SAC?
SADC.
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 Oh.
SADC. Thank you. The second question, can I? Okay. The second question, Excellence, Sir Minister, what's the paper Angola play during the South African presidents of the G20? Thank you.
The role of Angola in this thing, our understanding is that Angola is part of SADC. And therefore, Angola is represented during the South African presidency via SADC. The unfortunate thing, the president at the moment of SADC is Zimbabwe. And therefore, Zimbabwe will be representing SADC. In concrete terms, what would countries benefit from specific countries? It depends on a country by country. Let me just give an example. The closest home in SADC, we've had a challenge with debt resolution of Zambia. Through the common framework, we've been able to help Zambia to find a resolution of their debt challenges. I'm just giving you, when you say in concrete terms of what would happen. So in concrete terms, there are, you can't make a generic point. You must take on country by country. That's one example that comes to mind. I don't know what you want to add to.
No, I think you have covered it, Minister. There was the thing about whether the G20 would have mobilized finance for SADC. The G20 is not a financing organization. The G20 is an informal forum of countries that constituted what we've seen as the premier forum on world development, on world economic, global economic issues. And so you will find in many G20 statements that says we call on the multilateral banks to do 1, 2, 3. We call on the regional banks to do 1, 2, 3. We call on the IMF to do 1, 2, 3. So the G20 is an informal gathering, and there are times when the G20 would, as a grouping, in those financing institutions, take a position that says this is how funding must be generated. But those decisions are taken in the governance structures of those institutions, not in the G20.
Good afternoon, Nukukanya Mtambo from Eyewitness News. Minister Kodongo, and I apologize if this question has been asked. I walked in slightly after you had given your initial remarks. But when it comes to the lack of consensus, I don't know if you are able to take us into confidence in terms of what those new challenges are, because you said the reason why was because there are new challenges that presented themselves in this particular presidency that hadn't been present perhaps in the previous rounds. Are you able to take us into confidence about what those tensions were, and perhaps if there is a solution going forward to a point where you are able to reach consensus on your presidency? Thank you.
I said during the Indonesian presidency, the matter which gave occasion to the lack of consensus was the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I didn't mention the countries. I said, what is the matter giving occasion to that? I can say now, there are specific matters which will be of general challenge. I mentioned, for instance, one of them is climate finance, as of particular importance. I'm not going to say which country stands what on which point. Climate finance is one of the issues. There would be, I just mentioned but one issue. There are differences of opinion on the movement forward on those issues.
Any other questions, colleagues?
Hillary.
I think this would be one for the minister because it regards international tax cooperation. There's, just looking at the chair's statement and maybe at the previous statement, you've tried to harmonize, the G20 has supported working together on tax to prevent companies jurisdiction shopping and indeed high net worth individuals jurisdiction shopping. But there's obviously a concern about sovereignty. So I wonder if you can explain what is happening with the, I think it's the base erosion and profit shifting pillars, which are supposed to be progressing but may not be progressing. So that's the first part of the question. But the second is that the Brazilian presidency was quite keen on what President Lula talked about as a billionaire's tax. And their communiques talked about high taxation of high net worth individuals and global cooperation on that. Was there any of that discussion in these past 4 days? Thanks.
Obviously, two institutions have got two processes on the taxation arrangement. You have got, on one hand, the OECD, which is looking at Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. You have got the United Nations, which is looking at a different arrangement. You have got that resolution. Part of what you must know, as the governor was saying, the actual implementation of the decision belongs to a country. The G20 can't say generally all countries will implement this because they must respect the sovereignty and the specific circumstances of that country. For instance, in February last year, we implemented some of the resolution where companies that are placed in lower tax jurisdictions, we provided with the top-up. That's entirely a South African decision. Although there's agreement in general that can happen, but it's entirely a country decision. That's why we talk about sovereignty.
Sorry, Minister, was there any discussion of billionaires' taxes or high net worth individuals?
I don't remember. Can you remind me?
We don't discuss individuals.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, that's why I'm asking. I was chairing that session. I don't remember us discussing individuals. There could be a broad discussion on wealth tax, but it does not mean individuals.
Good afternoon, Minister. Crystal Odison, Al Jazeera. This morning, 6 former African heads of state and a vice president from Nigeria released a very strong-worded statement around Africa's debt crisis and how this is the worst debt crisis we've seen in decades. Of course, they support the G20 and all the initiatives to get Africa a voice. Do you have any comment around they planning to travel the world, engage with multilateral institutions around a comprehensive debt relief package for the continent? That's one question. And the second question is, given that the global economy is going through immense turmoil and tariffs are being implemented, is that a concern for the G20 countries, and is there any kind of sentiments around it? Thank you.
I'm aware of the initiative of what is called the former presidencies. They met the president of South Africa last week and informed him of their initiative as part of a broader array of organizations that want to confront the debt situation on the African continent. You will recall that there was a discussion also in South Africa about what is called the cost of capital. Stripped of all jargon, what that means is that we must make sure that financial multinational development institutions provide concessional finances to a number of these countries so that they should refinance the current expensive debt. So the cost of the debt issue has always been topical. The common framework in the G20 is also a product of that discussion about the debt issue, in particular on the African continent. So the debt issue has always been topical, and even in the G20 is no exception, is still topical. The second question, I didn't follow it, Governor. What? Oh, okay. What?
Yes. Oh, someone
What
is
is it?
asking
No,
a
no.
question.
Before you go, let's hear the second question.
Hi, Minister. It was relating to tariffs and the impact that it will have on the G20 countries.
Mind you, I don't know, but Tharas was informed by the governor this morning. So I don't know whether he's in a position to talk about the impact. I've not applied my mind on that. We've never discussed the tariff.
Well, the problem is that she's going to get the same answer. The thing about the tariffs is that the tariffs have not been imposed on the G20. Tariffs get imposed bilaterally by one country on that particular country. So it will have an effect on that country. How the other countries get affected is when there starts to be tariffs and counter tariffs, and then other countries start to imitate what others have done. That is when you will get the thing. But that is a hypothetical scenario because at the moment that's not what we have seen.
Yes, another question. I'm just curious about a specific point in the summary. One of the things you say is that the members reiterated the commitment to resistant protectionism, a bit related to the tariffs question that she just asked. I mean, given the current context, how did that was there agreement around resisting protectionism? Because we all know the position of the current shift.
There has been general agreement against protectionism and economic fragmentation. It has always been established principle within the G20.
Well, we don't see any other hands. I suppose we can bring this to an end now.
All right, Louise again. South Africa's got 4 main priorities. Among them is mobilizing finance for just energy transitions and also considering common and differentiated responsibilities of countries and their context. Just for clarity, given those 4 priorities, especially that one, is that still a sticking point? And if so, after the finance meeting, is there optimism that the outcome could change as the South Africa's G20 presidency progresses?
Again, the G20 is not a forum to raise financing. It discusses these issues and then would say that to the institutions, the view of the G20 is this, and G20 members in the institutions where financing is raised would then bring up those issues. If you check previously, is that you will find a situation where it says that we commit to raise financing for developing countries. And then you will find that the individual developed countries will then announce and says, this is what we are going to do. You will find a thing that says that the multilateral development banks must play a role in promoting blended finance. And you will then find that the World Bank, the African Development Bank, will then announce and says that this is what we had mobilized and this is what could be deployed. Once again, the G20 is an informal forum. The actual decisions get taken in the governance structures of those institutions. Well, the minister said this, we will take that last question. I do not see any further interest. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the end, and we have ended, and there will be another meeting in April.
There will not be there. The other meeting, the finance track meetings, we've got 4 meetings. There's one in the country concerned, April in Washington, in July in Zimbabwe, in Durban, October in Washington, then back home for the Leaders Summit. Those are our meetings, 5. Okay?